Welcome back to the 28storms.com tropical weather update on this Friday, August 12th. The National Hurricane Center is currently monitoring 4 separate areas for the potential for tropical cyclone development within the next 48 hours, although I think this graphic may be a bit more alarming than it really should be. The first feature that we're going to quickly talk about is this disturbance located to the north of Bermuda, although it's not well organized on satellite and is moving out to sea, so that's not a concern. Next up is this little tropical disturbance here to the northeast of Puerto Rico. It will be moving back toward the west over the next 72 hours, but I'm not overly thrilled about the development chances, and the Hurricane Center is only giving this a 20% chance over the next 48 hours. More importantly are these 2 tropical waves in the central and eastern Atlantic. First off, this is 92L Invest, but it's becoming quite clear that this is going to pass to the north of the Caribbean and to the east of the United States while it recurves. The only landmass it could really affect is Bermuda, and the development chances are currently less than 50%. And finally, the most notable system is 93L Invest. This has the greatest chance of directly impacting land, but the jury is still out as to whether or not that will actually develop. Today's satellite imagery shows that we're looking good fairly close to home. The Gulf, Caribbean, and West Atlantic are all quiet. The tropical disturbance that I mentioned to the north of Bermuda is already beginning to exit this picture, so again, we're not that concerned about that one. Here's this little small feature here becoming trapped by a ridge to the north. If you turn on the latest water vapor imagery, you can kind of make that out better. Here's the anticyclonic flow over the western Atlantic, so therefore this particular system is going to begin drifting more toward the west before eventually recurving back toward the northeast. Although it's on the convergence side of that ridge, so it may be somewhat difficult for it to maintain any convection once it gets a little bit more toward the west. And also notice there's a very weak upper level low here, and that's acting to enhance some northerly wind shear. So overall this environment does not look all that favorable. So that's already 2 systems knocked out of the way that we're not too concerned about. Now the third system, 92L Invest, has become a bit more organized over the last 24 hours. Overnight, the Hurricane Center did bump the chances of development down to 30%, but now today they're back up to 40%, and that's because the system has become a little bit better defined. We see that the greatest concentration of cloud tops and convection are located in the general proximity to where we would expect that low-level center to be located. However, the convection is still somewhat lacking, and that's due to the presence of that dry air immediately to the west, and also we have some slight southwest wind shear because we have a mid to upper level low located just to its north, so you can see the clouds are shrieking from southwest to northeast due to that flow. But notice how much latitude our system has gained just over the last 24 to 48 hours. This pretty much guarantees that there is no risk whatsoever to the Caribbean, and there's a very good chance now that the troughiness that's been fairly persistent over the western Atlantic will just ever so gradually guide this out to sea and become no threat to the United States. And finally, this is 93L Invest, the easternmost wave that we're keeping a close watch on. Fortunately, it doesn't look all that impressive today. We don't really see much in the way of convection. Despite this being in a somewhat favorable environment, we see that the dry air is actually worse near 92L Invest, and over here we have a pretty good moisture plume coming out of the eastern Atlantic and the coast of Africa. So this tells me that the low-level center just simply isn't strong enough to really generate its own convection yet, which is a good sign that this will not be in any hurry to develop. The latest SIMS 850 millibar vorticity analysis also confirms my suspicion that there's really not that much in the way of organization just yet near the surface or even the low to mid levels. As we can see, the vorticity is really stretched out here, and much of this is still embedded within the intertropical convergence zone along 10 degrees north, so we really don't have any good sign of organization at the moment. Despite that, there is still good reason to monitor the tropical wave as it moves westbound. We're looking at the wind shear analysis, and pretty much anything highlighted in blue denotes areas of less than 10 to 15 knots of vertical wind shear. So the upper level winds are fine. The dry air doesn't seem to be as bad as it could be. So we'll just have to closely monitor this tropical wave as it now looks like it will be heading toward the Caribbean. Before looking more closely at the dynamical models, here is a very quick model summary for all of our systems. The one to the north of Bermuda is obviously moving out to sea. We have our second system here between Puerto Rico and Bermuda. It's moving toward the west in the short term, but eventually will begin to make another recurvature here away from the United States. And next up is 92L Invest. The couple models that you see down here are outdated model runs, so those are no longer valid. This is the updated models, and obviously all of them take this more toward the north and northeast. Here's Bermuda though, so still keep an eye on things, although we're not looking at a very strong system. At the most, we're talking about a tropical depression or a tropical storm, if that. And finally, this is the most threatening system, 93L Invest. The models are now taking this more on a westerly track toward the Lesser Antilles. The biggest question will be whether or not it does develop. For a more dynamical model perspective, we're going to start looking at the GFS, and this is the latest 12Z model run. And we'll start off looking at the sea level pressure and precipitation forecast. You can barely make out 92L Invest since it's fairly weak, but this is the open tropical wave axis. This is the more potent 93L Invest. And we also have our couple of tropical disturbances out here in the western Atlantic, but they're so weak I'm really not even going to mention those. And if we notice today, look what it does with 92. It so clearly takes this to the north of the Caribbean, and then as we get into early Tuesday morning, or overnight Monday into Tuesday morning, we see that 92L is beginning to approach Bermuda from the south. And during the daytime hours on Tuesday, that's when 92 begins to make its closest approach. But once again, it's not appearing to be overly strong in this model solution. And also we have a trough approaching from the west, so the upper level environment will not promote the idea of rapid intensification. Again, we're only talking about a tropical depression or tropical storm at the most with this one. And also notice how 93L Invest is now just to the east of Barbados by Tuesday morning. And the GFS is no longer developing this into a strong tropical storm or hurricane. And if it were to remain generally weak, which is now being advertised by the GFS, it will be more prone to take a westerly track straight through the Caribbean, as the low-level steering flow is more dominant out of the east. And we can see that the GFS is now doing this, and even if we go into the extended range, and I'm talking about 8 to 10 days out, it takes the tropical wave all the way as far west as the western Caribbean to the south of Cuba. And this is becoming a bit more of a realistic scenario, as it looks like 93L is going to be in no rush to develop into a tropical cyclone. The overnight 0Z run from the ECMWF was quite similar, and this may look somewhat confusing at first, but this is the 850 millibar vorticity analysis. This is the Central Atlantic disturbance, and we'll see that 92L is going to be coming in from the southeast within 24 hours. We can see it a little bit better here. This is 92. This is the Central Atlantic disturbance, and both of these are going to quickly gain a lot of latitude over the first 48 to 72 hours. So both of these are feeling a weakness in the ridge here over the Central Atlantic. And so if we focus our attention more toward 93L in the medium range, we can see that this is the vorticity max associated with it. Again, here are the Lesser Antilles and the Caribbean. And if we advance this into day 4, 5, and 6, it quite clearly makes it into the eastern Caribbean instead of going to the north. And by 144 hours, or day 6, it's sitting to the south of the Dominican Republic, along with Puerto Rico. And by days 7, 8, 9, and 10, it actually is in very similar agreement by taking this to the south of Cuba, much like the GFS. And in fact, by day 10, it does have a fairly weak tropical depression or a tropical storm bearing down on the Yucatan Peninsula. But again, that is an extended 8 to 10 day forecast. So just to recap, I'm not overly concerned about the two disturbances located in the central and western Atlantic at this time. The more important features will be 92 and 93, the two tropical waves further out to the east of the Lesser Antilles, although it looks like 92 will only be a threat to Bermuda, and it's not a very strong threat. And finally, we have 93L Invest, the easternmost wave, that is going to be in no hurry to develop, and it doesn't look like it will develop within the first 48 to 72 hours, and the threat to the Lesser Antilles is minimal, at least at this point, but keep a close watch on it. And we'll just closely monitor it, as it looks like it will be taking that more westerly track toward more land masses. And even if it doesn't develop within the first 3 to 5 days, that doesn't mean it has or does not have some potential down the road as it begins to go through the central and even western Caribbean. So we'll keep an eye on all 4 of these features for you here at 28storms.com. Stay connected by checking out our Facebook, YouTube, and main page for the latest tropical weather information. So that's it for today, and have a good weekend, and check back again soon.